This video is offered here in its entirety. If you like what you see, please join us at pelicanplus.com, where there are more Boomers Church videos and where you can be a part of the premier platform for all things Catholic. Use the link in the description below to get a discount and to benefit the Collegium directly. Thank you.
Boomers Church, entertaining and enlightening stories, interviews, analysis, and everything else about life in the church before, during, and after the council. Boomers Church with your host, Edward Schaefer, starts now.
Hello, my name is Edward Schaefer. I will be your host for this episode of Boomers Church, and I am delighted you could join me. Have you ever wondered what being a Catholic was like before the Great Council, or during the upheaval of the Council itself? Or maybe living in the aftermath of the Council, having known Catholic life before? Well, stay tuned. In this show, we will remove the veil from your eyes. I'm here with a very dear friend today, Joe Tropeano. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you, Ed. It's good to be here with you.
Joe and I met in 2008 when the traditional Latin Mass was taking off in Ocala, Florida. And we became great friends. I directed the Schola at the church. Joe has trained the altar servers. He is an altar server trainer extraordinaire and really has managed all of the logistics to make that Mass possible every week since that time. And so I asked him if he'd be willing to sit and talk a little bit about the journey from pre-conciliar days to today, and I think you'll be in for a very informative and entertaining time. So I'm delighted to have you here with us.
Well, thanks, Ed. I'm always happy to be with you.
All right. You. So let's put some context on this. You were born in 1950.
I was.
And you attended grade school, Catholic grade school.
I did.
Up until 6th grade, so that would have been about 1961.
Right, the beginning of 62, okay. Correct.
And during that time, tell us about your altar serving time.
Well, back then we had these, at the school we had the Sisters of St. Joseph, and they were the ones that taught us all how to serve Mass. You first went into a classroom, you learned your Latin. Once you mastered the Latin, then they would take you over to the church and they would teach you how to properly serve the low high Mass. The high Masses were more for the older boys, so I didn't do that till later, probably my last year there, before I left, before we moved from that area. So that was the basic background on how we learned to serve, and I used to get up every morning. My parents had a day nursery down the street, so I would cross Federal Highway, which is a big highway, and walk right to church and serve 6 o'clock Mass every morning there.
And then you were there all day on Sundays as well.
Sundays, yes. I spent the day there, hoping some other server wouldn't show up, and I would serve that Mass also.
Okay. All right. I'm curious because it parallels a lot of my own training and early days of serving Mass. How many children were in the school, roughly?
I don't remember. I think the book that I showed you said 340 okay. Kids.
And how many boys were on the altar serving crew?
Well, probably I would say about 30, 40 maybe total.
Yeah,
that boys that serve Mass, and I gauged that by when we would take the field trips and go to the...
that parallels mine. There were 600 kids in my grade school, and there were about 60 boys. So it's about parallels.
Right.
So your family, tell us about the family life at that time, particularly with regard to the church.
Well, my mother was very much a German Irish. She was very into the Catholic faith. My dad was very into it too, not as much as my mother, but we would go to Mass every Sunday. They would go. I'd be serving most Masses, but they would go and be part of it.
They went to daily Mass frequently.
No, they didn't go to daily. My dad had a gas station, was off to work. He had to be at the station at 6 a.m. Back then, the companies made you open up at 6 in the morning, so he would be gone already to his gas station. My mother was a nurse, so she worked at Holy Cross Hospital, the Catholic hospital in Fort Lauderdale. And that was run by the Sisters of Mercy, which was also started by my parish priest, Monsignor O'Looney. So she would be there. We would just go off to school. It was back then. It was so safe. You walked to school and you walked home.
Yeah, the same thing.
Yeah.
Across busy streets,
Right.
middle of the night, it didn't matter.
People actually stopped for you, and when they saw when they didn't have to have cross guards.
Yeah, today you're a target.
Yeah.
All right, so the family was regular practicing
Yep.
Catholics.
Yep.
Okay. So the council starts in 1962.
Mm-hmm.
What happens then?
Well, I didn't see any real changes in 62 as an altar boy from 58. I started serving in 58. So I don't remember any changing our serving styles of any kind. I remember everything staying the same. And matter of fact, when we left there, and I'm thinking it was right around the end of 62 is when we moved from that area, and before my next Catholic life began, I didn't experience any changes
So
whatsoever.
you moved to a new parish.
We did.
Okay, and what happened there?
Well, they were starting a new parish. Fort Lauderdale was really growing quite a bit, so they were starting a parish Blessed Sacrament, and we attended Mass at a chapel and a funeral home for a while. So at there, I didn't notice at first anything really different. I was not serving at that time, but we went to Mass there and didn't notice any big changes. 63, the big changes, as you know, didn't come out till 64 completely. But there was a 1 week we went there, and we're all sitting there, and there's this young man with a guitar, and he started playing songs at the communion, and that was it. My mother, after Mass, grabbed us by the hands. I was a little older, grabbed my younger brother and sister. Off we went, and I didn't go back to church for quite a few years after that.
So the Mass was still in Latin.
Still in Latin.
And were these all high Masses or low Masses?
All low Masses at the funeral home. All
Okay,
low
so they were
Masses.
all low Masses.
Yes.
But then somebody brought a guitar in and started playing
They did.
folk songs, whatever you want to call
Whatever, I don't remember what it was, but
it,
yes.
during communion.
But the fact that there was a guitar there was, my mother was not very pleased. And
And so she took everybody out, and you just didn't go back.
Didn't go back, and it was I found that very odd from a young lad that's going to Mass every day, and then definitely on Sundays when we moved, because I was no longer in a parochial school, so I was going every Sunday and holy days, and I continued my faith. But from that point till 1970, my son was born in 76, our first child, and then I got this feeling I had to get back to church.
Okay, well, let's hold that for just a second.
Sure.
So your mom never talked about it.
Nope, never said a word.
And do you have any sense? I mean, what popped? What triggered her? Do you have any sense at all?
I don't, and like we had spoken before, and there might have been something more. I just don't remember the actual events, because I felt odd going from this big beautiful church we had at St. Anthony's going to Mass in a funeral home to begin with. I mean, it was a little chapel.
Right.
So that was odd to me to begin with, because we really didn't have a parish, so to speak, where we moved to it right away. So we could travel to St. Clement's, where I received my first communion, but other than that, there was nothing in our area because Fort Lauderdale was growing at the time.
Were your parents really connected to the community in your former church?
St. Anthony's.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, my dad especially. My dad was involved with helping out with altar boys like I explained, when we go for, Monsignor only would take all the altar boys down to Miami to this place, Vizcaya, and they had the Venetian pool there, which is a great, and we'd go there every year as a treat, and he would sit there and just enjoy the boys and give us coins for whatever we needed. But my dad would help by bringing a group because he had a station wagon down there. So he had a good relationship with Monsignor O'Looney. So that was a relationship. My mother, like I said, she was more involved with the Sisters of Mercy at Holy Cross Hospital. Even though I went there and served Mass, there was a priest there, a chaplain at the hospital. So I would go there on Sundays and in the afternoon or midday, and serve Mass there.
So they had more than just a Sunday Mass connection. They were involved in the parish or in Catholic life.
Right.
Beyond that.
Right.
They were more than just the family that checked off a box on Sunday and
right.
Mass.
Yeah. They had a wonderful faith.
And whatever it was, the guitars were sort of the final trigger.
Right. And I don't, like I said, I don't remember well enough to pin it down to anything else, but I do know that was the clincher. I remember that vividly. And it was a change in my life because from going, like I said, going to Mass every day to not going, and that's just the way it was. That's the way.
So your parents eventually did come back to the church.
They did. Early 80s.
A few years before they died.
Yeah.
They came back.
Well, my dad lived quite a bit. My mother died in 86. She went back probably in the early 80s. They opened up a new parish, St. Henry's, near their house, and they attended Mass there. Had a couple wonderful priests there, 2 Monsignors, and just really, really good, solid priests. But she did go back.
And now your situation, you were away from the church for a dozen years or so, and then the birth of your first child sort of triggered.
It did.
Okay.
It
So,
did.
all right, now tell us about your time, what it was like coming back to the church, which now by the early 70s is really different from what it was in
Very
the
different.
early 60s. So what was your experience, and just what was it like coming back into the new church?
Well, well, as you could expect, it was actually like a cultural shock, because going from the beautiful Latin Mass and then going to and the way the Novus Ordo was said in many parishes at that time, it was a rough thing to endure at times, because you sit there and you realize. You watch the consecration, and I can remember as a little boy kneeling to Monsignor, kneeling next to him, and I could hear him, you're right there, and you hear, Hoc est enim. You could hear him, the words of consecration, and the beautiful elevations and everything to go to what we had to visually go through then. But I had to be careful because my wife was coming into the church at this time. So you don't want to say too much, because now I never thought I'd ever go to a Latin Mass again. So you're kind of have to endure this for the sake, at least your family's in your mind, we're getting the faith. So we're trying to establish something as a family because of my wife, who was a convert, and myself just going back. So, but it was not as bad at that parish until we moved to Ocala.
Well, let me just insert, you were more prudent than I was. My wife was a convert, and I didn't withhold my
Dismay?
dismay about things. It's a miracle she survived me.
Well, no, and I said things oftentimes, but and even years later, my wife Robin was going through this book, and she finds this in a scrapbook. It's a note from my oldest daughter Tiffany, who says, "It's all my dad ever talks about is the old Latin Mass." And she wrote this down. We have it engraved in stone, so to speak. And I did. I always talked about that, that the way things were, to me, and but like I said, none of us, I never thought I would ever get to go to a Latin Mass again because we were part of the groups that were out there and it was available.
My youngest daughter, who lives in Paris, you know Anna Marie.
Of course.
She was attending Saint Eugène Saint Cécile, which is the diocesan Latin Mass parish in Paris. That's a very famous building and so on. And we encouraged her to get involved in the choir. We wanted her to find a nice, Catholic gentleman. And she didn't do that, but she had lunch. Some guy, she caught his fancy, and he invited her to lunch. And afterwards, she said, it was horrible. She says, all he did was complain about how horrible things are in the church. And I said, well, it must have been like having lunch with your dad. And she said, exactly. Well, all right. So you're in the
right
70s, 80s, and
right.
on, and you're enduring things that are
80s, yes.
giving you dismay, and they're
right.
getting worse and worse and worse. And then,
well, they did, and once we moved to Ocala, we experienced the clown mass, the puppet mass, the charismatic mass. We'd come back from Fort Lauderdale after visiting one night. We said that back then they used to have a mass late in the afternoon for people like us that were on the road, and we didn't know it was a charismatic mass. We went in there, and even my kids said, "Gosh, what was that?" And we never did ever experience that again. But yeah, the children's masses, and it was really quite disturbing to witness a lot of this stuff. But your Catholic senses, like when we were taught, you realized that what we learned about the Mass and what we were experiencing was contradictory to what we always believed as little children growing up. I felt bad my kids had to go through that. You think about that, the children. It's like our schools today. You're indoctrinating them, and that's what they were doing in the catechesis classes in these parishes. It was the same thing and the same rubbish that you get in most of these parishes today.
Yeah, when we had a similar experience when our children were young. So we were like you. All right, we didn't know there was a resistance movement. We
right.
didn't know that Bishop Lefebvre existed. We didn't know there were people attending traditional Latin Mass.
Right.
99% of us didn't even know that existed.
Right.
We just thought, this is what it is. And we found what they today call a Reverent Novus Ordo Mass. And that's where we went with our kids. And they heard Gregorian chant, and they heard polyphony and so on. And, it was reasonably respectable.
Right.
And we had to visit relatives one day outside of Fort Worth, and we attended Mass that Sunday in the nearest church. Well, the church looked like a converted dentist's office or something. It was a strange building to begin
right.
with, and well, the music started, and it was a mariachi band, and they were a bad mariachi band.
That's
right?
even worse.
And so when the trumpet started up, and my girls were pretty sensitive, not only just artistic, but they were involved in music lessons and everything else. And that trumpet started up, and their eyes just went, and they started laughing. and every time they played, the girls would look at each other and just start howling, and we couldn't get them to stop laughing during Mass because it was just so outrageous to them.
Right. I've seen those too.
Yeah. All right. So we're both experiencing this
right.
this
phenomenon
of the 70s, 80s, and beyond, and you're involved in the traditional Latin Mass now heavily.
Right.
How did that happen? What happened?
Well, I have a good friend that I worked with.
I'm sorry. Let me introduce.
Sure.
And your children are not practicing the faith.
They do not practice anymore. Nope.
Right.
They had their children baptized, and after that, I'd say probably about 7-8 years ago, they just quit. My son was a different story. His wife left him, and it's no excuse, but they had a beautiful Catholic wedding down at Disney and all this. But when she left, it just kind of, he was very involved, like I told you, at the Knights of Columbus with me. He did all this stuff. We were involved with the, lots of things at the church, very involved with the church. So that was a different story. The two girls, they just left the faith, and they don't do anything anymore.
Did they marry Catholic men?
My oldest daughter did, but he did not practice. Their family did not practice the faith.
Okay.
And my other daughter married a young man that's a wonderful young man, never been baptized. That's the life he grew up in. So he's.
So I just asked because that's our generation's experience.
Right.
Right. We raised our kids in a new religion.
Right.
And it didn't stick.
No.
And none of our kids are practicing.
And any of us that went through the catechesis programs, because they used to have the parents, you had to go to the classes, but you were set aside with a couple people that were taught from the diocese, and I happened to be going to it, and there was a fella in there, Joe Ostrowski, God rest his soul. He was a seminarian and dropped out right at the start. He went to Washington. He was in Washington D.C. and dropped out. But we listened to things like that Mary had children after Jesus and stuff. You know, the usual rubbish that they were throwing out there. And of course, me and him were the troublemakers. We would spout out all the time, and much to the dismay of and they were good people. The people that were teaching us were good, and they had a good Catholic faith. But this is what they did to them.
Misinformed.
They bring this stuff to people, and they put it out there because this is part of the curriculum. The same with the children. You get the kids, and you as a parent have to battle this. And I'll give you one quick example. We had gone away. My daughters were involved in cheerleading. We went to Jacksonville for a cheerleading competition, and we already looked up where to go to Mass and everything. And we got up Sunday. We just didn't go to Mass. So I told the girls, got to go to confession. It was my fault, but when you go back to the parish, and the priest, I won't mention his name, says, well, you didn't have to go to church. You were away. You know, God understands this. And so my girls come back and say, see, Dad, we didn't have to go to confession. Father said we were okay because we were away doing the cheerleading thing. So this is what you dealt with as a parent. If you tried to bring up the proper things, you were kicked down by the...
I had an almost identical experience. We were doing catechism. Our kids were homeschooled. We were doing catechism, and we got to a unit on the 10 Commandments. And we went through the 10 Commandments, and lo and behold, we went in to Mass that Sunday, and the 10 Commandments were in the readings, and Father gave a sermon on the commandments. And I was thinking in my pew, oh, this is so great. We give him a 1-2 punch. We're going to work together as a team and make this happen. And he gets to the third commandment and he says, now, is missing Mass on Sunday a mortal sin? Well, and then he goes on this long diatribe about how relationships don't get destroyed in an instant. They're kind of slowly destroyed, So, maybe once is not so bad, but you want to be careful because it damages your relationship with God. And then the more, at some point, you've now really damaged and it just all this sort of pop psychobabble.
Right.
And I thought, what am I doing? And of course, now it's Papa against the priest.
Right. Yep.
Right. And what do you do with that? It's just
You think you know more than the priest?
I was surprised because I had almost identical experience. All right, so you're going through this. Your kids grow up, and for one reason or another, they're not practicing like everybody else, and you discover the TLM. What happens?
Yeah. Just to step back real quick, I used to go visit my father after my mother died. I'd go down to Fort Lauderdale, visit my dad, take the train down there, and spend the weekend. And so Bob Francis, this friend of mine, he told me about this Latin Mass in Margate, which is close to my dad's house. So I went. I didn't, unbeknownst to me, it was a Society St. Pius V, which is a Sedevacantist group. But having said that, I went in and attended. I didn't know it at the time. Attended the Mass, and beautiful Latin Mass. I didn't go to communion that day, but still went. And I went back a few more times. And so it kind of generates your feelings towards such a beautiful Mass just to witness it again. So in, I forget what year it was, Bishop Winsky, now Archbishop Winsky in Miami, was holding a synod in the Diocese of Orlando, and they had 3 Latin Masses in the diocese, which I wasn't even aware of at the time. So I went to the synod and I asked the Archbishop, can we have a Latin Mass in the Northern Deanery? He says, well, you've got them down here. It's not that far a drive. I said, well, why can't we have one here? He goes, you can. You just got to present it in the synods. So I did that. Me and Robin went, and I presented it at the local parish, and they looked at me like I had horns on my head. And we brought it up, and it was written down. The priest looked at me, wasn't very thrilled.
This is a priest from Ocala?
From Ocala,
okay.
One of the priests. So then we were supposed to have another meeting to finalize the thing for was going to send to the synod, and me and Robin did not get invited to that. So very strangely that we were eliminated from the synodal process. So this same priest, he was away on vacation, and he was coming back, and by then I had met Father Fryer from the FSSP. Been down to St. Martha's down in Sarasota quite a few times attending the Mass. I learned about that, so we used to drive down there, go to Mass. Then we attended a Latin Mass magazine conference there in Sarasota. Met the priest and everything, Father McLucas, and then I was really getting built up for this. So I called this priest. He's coming back from Ireland, and I said, Father, we want to meet with you. And he goes, what is it about? I said, well,
this is another priest in Ocala.
Same priest in Ocala.
Same priest, okay.
And he was at Blessed Trinity. So I says to him, we'd like to meet you. So he says, well, get your gang together and meet me such and such a time. So we get in a meeting, we have a meeting, and he's not overly thrilled about this. And he says to me, the first thing we got to do is find you an old priest. I said, don't worry, I got a nice young fella that I met that's willing to come once a month and say the Mass. He goes, well, we'll see about that. He said, but then where do we put you? How about if we put you over here, or out there, or whatever? And so he said, well, don't do anything to hear from me. I'll go to the deanery meeting. I'll bring this up. Well, in the meantime, I heard about Father O'Doherty, which we attended that parish often too, Queen of Peace. So I said, he had made a comment that if you got a group of people that wanted the Latin Mass, he would be happy to have it at Queen of Peace. So I go and I meet him one day out in the parking lot, and I chat with him about it, and he just said, absolutely, the Holy Father has spoken. So
this would have been after Summorum Pontificum.
2007, yes,
and so,
right after it.
So once Benedict said,
right,
this is a approved right of the Church,
correct.
Father O'Doherty said, who am I to say no?
Absolutely,
basically.
He said, absolutely. So then I got him to meet with Father Fryer, and Father Fryer agreed to come once a month. And it was late. It was a 6 o'clock Mass on Sunday. So that's how we started, 6 p.m. on Sundays once a month. Now that didn't last very long, because about 2 months later I get a call from this fellow that just moved to Gainesville. And he's somewhat of a renowned music man, to put it nicely. And he says to me, what kind of Latin Mass are you doing? Are you doing a Novus Latin Mass, or the Novus Ordo Latin Mass, or the traditional Mass? I said, we're doing a traditional Mass.
I had totally forgotten that.
Yeah. So I says to him, he asked me if he could contact the priest. I said, yeah, of course. So I gave him Father Fryer's number, and within a few days I get a call from Father James Fryer, and he says to me, can you get ready for a sung Mass on Sunday? Now, I haven't done one of these since 1962, and don't remember much of it. So I get my boys, I watch videos, I do everything we can. So that Sunday we started, as you're aware, the first sung Mass at Queen of Peace Catholic Church. And then from there we did many of them. And the beautiful Masses we had there, because of this group coming together, all of us, was pretty remarkable that we got to that point in such a short period of time. Then we started having Mass every single Sunday. So this went on for years. We started doing Holy Weeks. The FSSP would send seminarians. So we did Holy Week quite a few numbers of years. and had some great seminarians. We had them in our house. They're singing. It sounds like heaven in my house. The music is going through all the walls. And
I have to tell you, the first Holy Week that I did the Schola for that, I had never done a Schola for TLM Holy Week. And so I went online, and online there are Holy Week, old Holy Week books that you can print. So I printed them out and bound them so we had the music. And so we were completely trained for all this, to do this. And then we went down to Ocala to have a rehearsal or a walkthrough of some sort with the priest. I don't remember which one was doing the Holy Week. And well, my books were from 1929.
no,
and so we would start going through, and he would say, "No, we don't do." And I say, "Well, what about this?" He said, "No, we don't do that anymore." And then I go, "What about this?" "We don't do that anymore." So that was
you forgot the 55 change things.
that was my first experience of the 55 changes,
Right.
sort of butchering
Yes.
Holy Week rites.
Yes.
And I want to add a little bit to your story of when we started doing high masses. So I had gone to Father Fryer and said, well, I've got this Schola that wants me to train them in Gainesville, but we don't have any place to sing. Would you be open to having us do high masses? And I thought he was going to want to audition us or interview us or something.
Right.
Nothing. He just said, fine, sure, it'd be great.
Yeah.
And so we came down, and it was an amazing group at that time. I mean,
Oh,
it was one of the most talented groups I've
Yes.
ever conducted. We could have 2 rehearsals and sing a Palestrina Mass, 2 more
Right.
rehearsals and sing a Mozart Mass. I mean, it was incredible.
And one of them is handling the Schola right now.
Yes, yeah.
For Queen of Peace.
He's gone on and done a
Wonderful
great job.
young man.
Had a couple of male altos, which gave it
Right.
which is Anthony's. He's still doing.
And the instruments.
Great, yeah,
it
great,
was just
phenomenal sound. But the very first one we came down, I think we sang the Palestrina Missa Brevis, but I'm not 100% sure of that. But we did all the Gregorian proper chants, and then we did a polyphonic mass. And when it was over, one of the students, who at that time was 18 years old, he was a freshman, so he'd been completely raised in the Novus Ordo Mass and had never experienced even a low traditional Mass. And he was just standing there, and I came up to him and I said, how was that? And he looked at me and he said, why did we ever stop doing this?
Yeah. Good question.
It was amazing. So anyhow, from that point, it has grown. Unfortunately, Karen and I moved away to try to get the college started.
And we miss you dearly.
And we missed being down there. We loved
Right,
it.
I understand.
It was great. But that grew from when we started, it was 35 regularly, maybe 50 on a good Sunday, and by the time we left in 2020,
Close to 200, I think.
it was running over 200.
Right,
And what
a little
about
bit
now?
over 200. Right now we average anywhere between 340 to 400, depending. And remember also, we have a mass at 4:30 in the afternoon, and we have some that travel a bit. But it's the beautiful part is we have so many baptisms, so many first communions, and the young families. We have so many of the young families. They travel from other parishes just to come to the mass, and they love it. And like I said, that we have families with 6, 8, 10 kids that come to this mass. And I'm not saying anything about any other family. I'm just saying that it's the young people once they experience it. And then they spread the word to the other young people. And our parish priest, Father O'Doherty, couldn't be more supportive. He loves the Mass, wishes he could say it himself, but he just supports us 100%. So, and I think that support is going to lead to some really good things. We're very prayerful and hopeful that...
And I don't know whether these parents are thinking this, but a Catholic parent takes on a grave obligation to raise your children in the faith. Your primary responsibility is to
be teachers,
bring souls into the
Right.
into the world for heaven, and to raise them to become saints.
right?
And I find it fascinating that all of the statistics that are coming out now that talk about people staying in the church, people leaving in the church, and so on, right? So the average 18 to 32-year-old young Catholic, I think the average weekly participation in Mass is in the single digits. It's like 7%.
Right.
Except those young Catholic adults that just left home, they're going to college, or they're out on their own, who have been raised in the TLM, that regular Mass attendance is 98%.
Yeah.
I don't know if young families sort of instinctively just are drawn to the Mass because of aesthetics or whatever, or they know this, but I'm very hopeful because they now are using tools that the statistics show them they have a much better chance of keeping their kids in the faith.
And keeping, I think that's what kept us. You know, I had a meeting with a bishop one time, and that was my comment that, you know, that by the grace of God, I was taught the faith by these wonderful nuns. I know you hear all these horror stories, which, especially today, I dismiss them because I have nothing but fond memories of the nuns there and the nuns at the Holy Cross Hospital, their dedication to the sick and the dying at the hospital, and their dedication to teaching children the catechism and all that. And I got I think, a great Catholic education, which bothers you as a parent that your children didn't get this growing up in the 80s and early 90s, that they were deprived of this. The Baltimore Cat. Matter of fact, one of my grandsons was at the church, received his first Holy Communion, and we gave our daughter the Baltimore Catechism, and her first response to her mother was, "I never learned any of this," and it's heartbreaking as a parent, because it's like, even in education, if you're not taught the proper stuff, how are you going to maintain it? I was lucky, and I told this to the bishop. I was lucky. And that's somehow I've managed to, even though I left the faith a while, to come back to it and understand the faith because I was taught it properly. And that's the thing we have at our parish, which is so great, that our parish priest, Father O'Doherty, he allows parents to use the Baltimore Catechism. They don't have to go through the regular diocesan thing, and teach their children, and then be tested on it, and then go have their first Holy Communion that way. And the same with the confirmations. They can go down to the parish in Sarasota and do that with the bishop down there. So I think this has been a great thing, and I watch these young families, and it's so. We just had a big altar boy camp. We do it every year, and our pastor is so supportive of this. I think we had 67 boys this year. Came from all over Florida, and a couple from Georgia for the altar boy camp we have there. And the fraternity comes down, the priest comes down, he does the talks, and we do masses, we do sung vespers the last night, and it's so nice to watch these boys get to participate in part of the faith that so many of us have lost through the years. So it is. It's very, very rewarding. I'm getting kind of old. I need somebody younger to...
But it gives us hope. I mean,
it does.
It definitely gives us hope. In spite of the fact, the grief we suffer from our own families,
right.
We see what's happening in the next generation, and, you know, we hope that over time those people in positions of influence in the hierarchy of the church will begin to see the fruits of tradition and begin to restore the church to her rightful place. But in any case, we have great hope for it. So
we do.
Joe, it's been a pleasure to see you again. It's been great to have you
here. Always a pleasure to see you, young fella.
God bless you.
Thank you, Ed.
All right, you baby boomers. Keep the faith and keep moving. Just a reminder, if you have a story about something before the council, a story about going through the changes, or a story about living after the council, having experienced Catholic life before, I would love to hear from you. Send me an email at boomerschurch@gmail.com. Here's some other prompts for you. Were you part of the throngs of people who left Catholic schools and decided to homeschool? If so, why? Or here's another one. What were you doing when John F. Kennedy was assassinated? How did you experience that, or the assassination of Bobby Kennedy or Martin Luther King Jr.? How do you explain them? And how are these different from the recent assassination attempt on President Trump or the recent assassination of Charlie Kirk? Do you have questions you'd like answered? Do you have a story that you think others should hear? For any of these, write to me at boomerschurch@gmail.com. That's it for today. Thank you for tuning in. And for all you boomers out there, keep the faith and keep moving.